In today's episode, we have Andrea from Money Squirrel. So Money Squirrel is a fintech company that's just gone through funding rounds. So it's just secured funding. So it's a really great chat. We talk about that process of going through funding and how she went about it. And we also talk about plans for the future and the growth and how that's going to look. And we'll also probably check back in maybe a year just to see how she's got on and see where the business has gone. But I think it's a really interesting chat, and I hope you get loads of value. So this is the Eardley Bird Podcast with me, Olli Eardley. Hello. Hi, Andrea. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking. So where I'd like to start, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you and your background. So I was wondering if you could talk us through your journey to get into this point.
Absolutely. I've had a very squiggly career. That's the politest, nicest way of saying it. So I ended up falling into tech by accident 10 years ago, and Fintech by design, I suppose, more recently than that. But I didn't start out in tech at all. I didn't have any plans on getting into it, and I don't have an engineering background. I'm not a developer. So I actually studied 1 year at university. It was supposed to be business studies and psychology, and on day one of year one I changed it to ancient history and archaeology. Okay. And on day one of year two I tried to change it again to drop archaeology and do Spanish instead, and I couldn't, so I left because I just couldn't work out what I actually wanted to do with a career and how education tied into it. So I went into what I considered kind of adult working world and in the real world, and I nearly qualified as paralegal in property at the time, so commercial property I was working in. I didn't, and then I moved out to Spain for a year where I learned traditional Spanish and also Catalan versions of all the different drinks names in the bar I was working in, and then came back to the UK, fell into property services, so back into residential property, but doing something completely different. Started a business with two other people at 26. I was very naive and young and didn't know any of the things to ask at the time to protect myself. About 4 years later, fell into recruitment because I basically got told at that point I can either do recruitment or PA. I'd done recruitment as a part of my previous role in the business, so I fell into it and I disliked it about as much as I maybe expected to. Was told I'm really organised. I'm like, yeah, I mean, some people are, some people aren't. I definitely have that skill. And I should train as a project manager. And I laughed because I thought project management was a skill, the career that you could get paid for to boss people around. So I retrained. I trained myself as a project manager over Christmas 1 year, and then the first job that I happened to get in that field, I suppose, was for a software company, and is very, very squiggly. Yeah, I pick it up in software. I don't code.
That is crazy because most people, I suppose a lot of people in tech almost think, right, okay, I go to university, I got something to do with tech, and I just go straight into tech and I build a career in tech. Yeah, you've really, you have gone the squiggly route, which is, in a way, it's great. I think it's you kind of found out where you wanted to end up naturally, which is cool. It was an area I wanted to check really, just to see if you had a more technical background before that, but it seems you don't.
Nope. And one of the things I'm doing now is trying to encourage people, not just young women, but encourage people generally to remember that tech and other fields don't have to be quite so clean cut. You don't have to have an engineering background to work in tech. You can be an analyst, you can be, really logical, you can be quality assurance, you can work product and project management, which is like really, really interesting just for me. There's so many other things that you could do within that field. And it's the same as in loads of other fields as well. But I never had one of those. My sister was different. So she knew exactly what she wanted to be from when she was about 7 years old. And it took me a long time to work out what I was good at and what I enjoyed, which is much more important to me than feeds into that. And I think careers guidance at school and sort of higher education struggles a little bit with that. And that's one of the reasons I now volunteer with the local school to kind of just help reinforce a little bit of that message of it's not quite so, if it's not doctor or lawyer or something and you don't always know, that's okay. You can figure it out.
Mm-hmm. How about the finance side of what you guys do? Have you got any sort of finance background, or is it all just like you can?
No, it's a
Which is great.
byproduct of being a business owner. You end up having to get good at things that you don't want to get good at. Not saying I'm an expert in finance or anything like that, but yeah, it's just something that I was already doing. So Money Squirrel, which is what I'm doing right now, the fintech product, it's something I was already doing manually for a long time, running my consultancy. The problem solving part of my brain never switches off. And these days, especially in my work, most problems I come across can be solved through tech. So that's where I've ended up in fintech. And it's a term that didn't even exist a few years ago. It's just a niche type of tech. It's not maybe quite as right now.
It looks quite glamorous from the outside looking in, doesn't it? Yeah. So on that point then, what is it like running a sort of a fintech company?
Right now, because we're so early stage, it's organized chaos, and I do mean chaos. But, especially in the startup world, especially when it's tech, it comes with its own kind of challenges. Then you add in fundraising, which I was a little resistant about as well. It's all multiple like full-time specialist jobs that you're trying to juggle at the same time, as well as really running a business and setting that up from the ground. So it is chaos, but I seem to thrive off of it. So I think it ties in with software project management. There's the more traditional kind of waterfall idea that everything is sequential. That doesn't really work for software. I actually qualified in Prince 2, which is waterfall, which is a much more traditional, slightly outdated or old-fashioned. It's still got its place, but, not so much in the tech world. The tech world loves talking about agile and all that sort of stuff, which, as the name implies, you adapt. You adapt pretty quickly as you go. And that's one of the things that I ended up finding out I'm reasonably good at. Not so much chasing my own tail, but just being fluid and adapting. And it's such an important part of what I do day to day now as running such an early stage business is adapting. So you make a plan and then you see how far you actually get with that before you have to swiggle around.
What I like about that is having a sort of project management background allows you to add that level of organization, but you're still going to have to adapt. There's still going to be things thrown at you, which is just natural for these types of businesses. But I think having that foundational aspect probably helps, because I think a lot of people, if it was me starting a tech company, there might be a lot more chaos because it's not as organized as someone that has a project management background. One question I have is about the fundraising. So how have you found that side of the business, if you can talk about it?
I suspect people are going to get really sick of me saying this. Absolutely over the moon that I've managed to do my very first fundraise. And I worked very hard to get there, as my friends keep reminding me that I have to stop downplaying that and calling it luck. It wasn't luck. But for someone who doesn't come from a wealthy background, it's not a boo-hoo. I'm very comfortable, but I don't come from a wealthy background. I don't have any rich friends to open certain doors. The people that are in that kind of community, they're not maybe as vocal about how much easier that makes it for them, or the fact that you have done one in the past. If you've done a previous fundraise, you're seen as having a track record, doing it from scratch or doing it for the first time, especially at 40, when I kind of don't live and breathe the startup world. I've come from a tech world, but it's more, there's nuances there, and not always knowing how to navigate that. It's been a roller coaster. So what also didn't help is it didn't really follow fundraising as a topic or much of a trend. But even I was like painfully aware of it before I started fundraising, that the landscape had changed since before COVID. So I think for a couple of years around the time of COVID, which was before I had anything to do with it, people even now talk about almost like free money because of the interest rates having dropped, I think. I hope that's not a silly thing to say, but I'm sure that's kind of how it comes across now. But after that, everyone's purse is kind of tightened, but what that meant was that everyone's requirements changed and their baseline changed fundamentally. So actually for early stage businesses and for first time fundraisers, that's made it almost Everest to climb, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't think that I would get funded, and I nearly pulled the plug on everything back in the summer last year.
Mm-hmm.
And a year's worth of all that work that I'd put in place came together just around the time when I nearly did close it down and do something different. It was absolute roller coaster, and we are where we are, and I'm very, 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 very happy that we're here.
Yeah.
But it's not been easy at all, and it's not been simple, and it's not been straightforward, and it doesn't matter how many articles you read or how many people you talk to. I don't think anything quite prepares you for. It's not enough to say you'll get a lot of rejections. Sometimes it's even more than that, where you don't even get as far as the rejection. You actually don't even get to open the door in the first place to get the rejection, which is more different than that. So it's been fun. Yeah.
Would you have any tips for anyone trying to do that for the first time in a similar position to you? Is there anything that you've learned that might be able to cut some corners for people?
Yes, and I know that this will come up a lot, so I know what they are. I'm just trying to work out which ones are the nice little kind of snippets. But the first one that really helped me is, and I have to work out how to describe this, but almost intentional networking. The long version of this answer isn't what I'm going to give you, but the long version depends entirely on the business, who you're targeting, what stage you're at. So mine, it was pre-revenue, pre-seed, solo female founder in Fintech. I made the choice not to look for co-founders because it felt like a distraction rather than something that would have helped. And angel syndicates, it was still even too early for them. The first thing is ask people in your network if they can actually make any intros, intros, or even intro you to someone who can intro you. So second, third degree connections to high net worth individuals or just anyone who might be in that world. I assumed incorrectly that people maybe who were fundraising themselves weren't also investors, which is actually not true, which blew my mind a little bit. So ask, definitely, because you never know who someone you know or worked with might know. And that could open a lot more doors a lot faster rather than focusing on making it a really pretty deck that you're going to send cold to people who probably won't read it because they've got so many others that they got through that day.
Yeah. Is there any other big, key tips?
Maybe a more general one, but I know that it's definitely what helped me. So I lean into my own strengths and also my own personality because honestly, I don't have the capability to do anything different. So I do lean into it. I lean into the stupid humor I've been told to have, almost like a frat boy sense of humor. And that's okay because it makes people laugh and it makes me laugh. But, there's no veneer and pretense. And I used to lean into that even when I was just working as a contractor or a consultant with new and existing clients. The trust is built up much faster by them when they see the real you and that you're not trying really hard to be something that you're not. So be authentic is a really easy snippet, but this is the context behind it and why. People respond to it from just a fundamental psychological reaction before they even realize that they've done it. Whether they like you or not, it doesn't matter. At least they've seen that you're not trying hard to be something different. It cuts out a lot of the wrong conversations really, really early on, which was so key for me because there's only so many hours in the day. If it's the wrong person, I don't want to have to waste a lot of energy talking to them, being nice, pretending to, be engaged in that particular conversation when we both know it's not of interest. And that's not pitching, that's just talking at a fundamental level. And for me, I know a lot of people and they do it well. They go to industry-specific expos and events. For me, being only in rooms full of tech and fintech was actually not the right thing to do. So when I say intentional networking, and kind of that's why there's quite a long answer to that, I suppose. For me and for my personality and how I have conversations, because I do not have the capacity to pitch select someone very quickly. I find selling quite awkward, especially if it's on my own behalf. So I just have to get to know people, and if it leads somewhere, fantastic, and if it doesn't, then that's also a win. And what I found was being in the right room, whatever the right room is, you end up, there's actually a post going out about it tomorrow, you end up being top of mind of the right people who will always then keep you top of mind, even if, there's no agenda there and you're not always talking to them, which is incredibly valuable in our world.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the time to keep someone warm and engaged all the time. It's too artificial anyway. For me, that ended up being interesting events or events that were shared or put on by people I found interesting, not always fintech specific expos. I find expos and conferences a very, very difficult format. I don't like it very much. It's too transactional. So I've avoided them. If I've gone, I've had a laugh with my friend Jim, who runs the Karma stand at Accountex, rather than walking, pounding the pavement at Accountex, because I just find it awkward. I leaned into what works well for me, and after a year of doing that, day in, day out, it came together.
No, I like that. It's obviously intentional networking, and I think it is underrated networking in a lot of ways. I think I didn't really start doing it properly until last year. And then since then, I feel like I've got loads more people that I'd say are in my network and I'm friendly with, not necessarily to sell to, but it's more those, like you said, it's like you are top of mind. If they ever need your services or what you do, then you're there. Yeah.
Feel free to completely cut this bit out if it's going to be tangent. However, I have a particular opinion on networking, and again, it's how it works or doesn't for me. So I have never understood how going to the same series of the same networking group or club with the same people saying the same thing, and I do mean the same thing every time, when you stand up and do your 60-second speech or pitch to the same group that you saw last week or the last month. I don't understand that. I think that should be reframed in, that's a support network, that's a support group for people that need that because they work on their own, which is lonely, honestly. Because that's what the value I hear from people that goes to those things regularly. I am, pardon my French, an absolute networking slapper. I have gone to loads of different series once and once only, and never gone back, because I've met one fantastic person at that one thing I went to. It was a great event, but that room might not be a room where I want to go and sell to them, because I'm not going to have those conversations to sell to them in the first place. I'm just going to meet great people. And I've actually made really great, and I call them work friends, the last 2 years by doing this. And they happen to be great connections as well. And they've led to something. And I'll give you an example. I went to a Business Junction event. I saw it by accident on LinkedIn. I don't know who posted it. I don't know why it came up on my feed. And this would have been last January 2024. And I thought, it looks like a really good networking series. I've never heard of it. Central London, and it's a different group to my normal kind of area, I suppose. I'm going to go. I'm going to see what it's all about. And it was actually a really, really good one. And I met Georgina Dean, who is call her to her face, my favourite blonde bombshell. This event. We'd actually already been connected for months on LinkedIn. And when we started talking, we realised that we were practically neighbours. In Berkshire, one town away, counts as neighbours.
Right.
But she and I, we should be chalk and cheese. We should, she's a super connector, and we should be selling to one another, and neither of us had any intention of doing that. And she just kept me top of mind and kept inviting me to really nice social things after that. And that's it. She's the reason that I ended up meeting my lead investor on the round, and it was an accidental invite to a cheese evening that led to that. But that was 8 months later, and there was no agenda there. I was looking forward to seeing her over cheese one night. And I've never gone back to Business Junction because the actual format itself won't work for me. That pitching format won't work for me. But I met one great person, and that is more than enough from one event that I've gone to.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I'm a bit of an introvert when I go out to these things, so I have to almost force myself into those situations. But I always go into it saying, I just want to meet maybe 5 people, have really good conversations with 5 people, no agenda, I'm not trying to sell anything. And I feel like that always works out better than I feel like there's some people that maybe are newer to networking potentially that would go in and try and pitch. Actually, it's not always the case. Some people have been doing it for years and just stuck to their pitching method. But I just feel like it doesn't work. I think people get uncomfortable being under pressure almost of a pitch. Whereas if it, like you said there, if you're just going to have cheese and have a chat with people, naturally those conversations happen and people want to help you out in most cases if you're just a good person.
And I think it weeds out the right fit for your mentality and your personality, which is so important. Otherwise, it's too forced. And I think there are certain products and services that naturally people cannot live without as soon as they hear it. But so few of what we do is like that, that's not, the format isn't going to work for 98% of us by doing it that way of standing, doing a pitch and hoping that someone's going to buy the services because they can't live without it. For most of us, that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm. And the same from an investment perspective. I guess if you want an investor to work with you, you kind of want to almost like them a bit or get along with them, because if they're going to be in your business potentially or like involved in your business in some way, you still want to have a decent relationship and know that they understand your sense of humor, for example. So exactly. So I think I love everything about that. I think it's a good way, especially for people that aren't as well connected just naturally through people that they know, and it's just obviously building out those relationships.
I'll tell you a little bit about how I ended up meeting all of the investors. There's not that many of them, and there's probably two main conversations there anyway, because it's exactly that. So when I say intentional networking, and again, like that means something different for everyone anyway. What networking means is different for everyone. I think it's actually a really misused and misunderstood term that confuses people because they think that it's go into a room full of strangers and sell, and if you don't sell, you're doing it wrong, which just is terrible advice. When I said that a year of work and a year of that intentional being in different events and talking to different people came together. So I met a bunch of people, even through the LEP, the local, I can't remember what it stands for, but like we've got the Berkshire Growth Hub is the LEP for us. Right. They made some introductions to other sort of business advisors, someone who works with Innovate UK Edge something or other, which wasn't relevant for me. And just one thing leads to another, and one conversation and intro leads to another. And I ended up getting a lot of some good, some bad, some irrelevant advice generally about investing, which was useful. So I started taking all of that on. And then because I still hadn't had any kind of warm intros and no access to them, I started going to groups that encourage bringing those founders and funders together. One of them was Female Founders Rise. It's one of the big things that they focus on. I love the work that they're doing. It's not forced, and it's just for all the right reasons in all the right ways. And it provides a lot of not only community support, but tangible access to tangible things, as well as advice, mentorship, and resources, which is really useful. But I ended up going to one of the events that they put on jointly with someone else. I can't remember where I was during the day, but it was very unlike me. By the time I got there in the evening for the event, I was so drained. I couldn't speak to anyone there, which I don't normally do that. So I just sat in the corner, listened, absorbed, and followed up with people on LinkedIn the next day. And one of those was Kyle, who posted something. I wasn't connected to him. I hadn't spoken to him at the event, but I saw that because he tagged someone, I saw that he posted about something to do with open finance. I work in now something to do with open banking. So this term intrigued me, and I went to speak to him. And he happens to run a community of open finance businesses, startups, established companies, and free community to join. One of the best communities, and I am like super selective about them because some of them can be so spammy and irrelevant. We kept talking. He made some great intros within the community, went to some events that they put on, and because they're really well connected in my world, it was such a relevant space to be in. super well fit, super good fit, both ways, basically. And in the summer, he said, we're putting on an accelerator program. And he now knows this, but I went and I rolled my eyes internally and I went, oh, another one. I don't need an accelerator. I need something very different. I've heard good, bad, and awful things about accelerator programs. I don't think they're for me, but I didn't want to burn the relationship. I wanted to work with these great people. And I was like, right, I'll apply. Sure, that sounds great. And actually, not only was I the one business that they selected out of 60 plus applications that they had, it's one-to-one, so they don't work with a cohort of businesses, which means that it's a two-way conversation and they tailor it exactly to what you need. It was at the right time because I was ready to pull the plug before this came about. It was everything that I actually needed when I needed it, which sounds really cheesy, but it was. And if I hadn't gone to this one event, and it wouldn't have led on to all of these, but it's given me now 4 angel investors who come with the accelerator program who are in my sector and they understand fintech and they work with banks. If I hadn't gone through that, sequence of dominoes, I would never have come across them in the first place and never been connected to them. There's no other way I would have come across this community, basically, if I hadn't done this intentional go to these events type thing that I was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you almost got to get yourself out there and then meet the right, and I feel like it naturally happens in a lot of ways. I think you hear a lot of these stories from founders where it's like almost like I was almost giving up or I wasn't really sure where it's going and everything kind of clicks or the right things happen at the right times. But it's not luck, it's intentional. You're putting yourself out there to get those opportunities.
Yeah.
So talking about the business...
And giving it the time to actually come together, because that's the bit that was missing. And I'm one of the most impatient people in the world. I wanted it to be as simple as it's made out. Send some pictures, send this beautiful deck out, give it 2 weeks and you'll be funded. That does not work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for 99% of people, it probably doesn't work like that.
No,
so Money Squirrel, then, it'd be great for the people listening to this podcast who don't necessarily know you guys. Could you talk me through the business and give us a bit of background?
Absolutely. Most people won't have heard of us yet. We are so early stage and so new. I was solving my own problem with this product. So for 5 years, I was running my software consultancy. It's a fancy word for it being me and a small team of freelancers and people that I work with quite closely. So super simple cash flow, super simple incomings, not much outlays to manage. So, very painfully aware that it is one of the simplest types of businesses to run. Okay. But for 5 years, every time I got an invoice paid, I'd get my notification on my phone and do a happy little dance because it's the favorite thing in the world to get some money in the bank. And then I would, because I'm organized, I would remember that day, at the same day at the latest, to go and move the VAT amount of the invoice. And for me at the time, another 20%, but it can vary. I'd move VAT and another 20% from the account it's hit into a separate interest-paying savings account that's got, it's not, I was never using Starling Spaces because they don't pay anything in terms of interest, and I'm ticked. And I kept doing the exact same proportion. It's always the same percentage for me. Again, caveat, simple. It doesn't vary. And I just kept thinking it's an automation, like low volumes, super simple. People that aren't as organized as me will forget, or worse, never do it at all. How do they not get into hot water when it comes to pay the VAT bill? An e-commerce business, like running at fast, high volumes, it's a nightmare, And I kept, because I'm connected around the world with developers, I looked around outside of the UK out of professional curiosity to find out where has that already in their banking. And we couldn't find it. This was a few years ago we started looking into it and we couldn't find it. So I sat on it for a little while and I did a bunch of research and I thought, no, it's not going to go anywhere. And it needed FCA approval, and actually that turned out to be not quite the case, thankfully. But I sat on it for a while. I kept it never went away as got to scratch that itch, because I see it. I see the value in it. And then fast forward a little while, I bootstrapped it, which means I paid for it while I was also paying my own bills. I nearly went insane trying to run basically 3 full-time jobs at the same time. And we've built and launched the product to do exactly what I've just described. I can now link my Starling and my Audible, so current account, savings account, set my preferences, which are now 20% VAT and maybe 5% of the rest. And once a day at 4:00 in the afternoon, I get a notification from Money Squirrel to say, we've calculated today's incomings according to your preferences. Do you want to make the bank transfer? And it will take me to Starling to go and either authorize it or ignore it, basically. So I was solving my own problem.
Yeah.
And I was my very first very happy customer, and I can't tell you the thrill to actually see it in action for a live invoice that came into the wild, basically, finally, after however many years ago I'd actually had that very first idea of it. We've got big future plans, but for now, the very first thing is link 2 accounts, set your preferences, 2 percentages or just 1, and let the automation do its thing, always within your control. So we don't touch the money, we don't hold the money, we don't hold it in escrow, we don't do anything around that. We don't even sell savings accounts. We're allowing you to leverage more of what all the different banks actually give us independently, but nothing kind of ties them all together at the moment, more than just maybe a dashboard. So that's what we now do.
So can business owners use any existing bank account, or is there specific limitations?
Almost any existing current account. So there's a limitation in terms of open banking, which is what we're limited by. Any savings product, because if it doesn't link, you can just manually put in the bank account details for the savings product and it will send it to the right place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the list on the current account side is pretty extensive.
Okay, perfect. And how long did it take to develop? That seems like that might be the longest part of this process, but no, is it fairly straightforward?
Because of my background, because of the amount of research and prep and the actual build of the live product took 10 working days, and it was less than £10,000 to build and launch and develop, basically. But that is oversimplifying. It's accurate, but it's oversimplifying the fact that we'd provided designs, we'd done a prototype, and we're building off of an existing layer. So if anyone's familiar with Revolut, they actually work off of something called TrueLayer, and it's a similar setup that we have. So we didn't build and rebuild the TrueLayer equivalent. So 2 weeks. Done.
Wow. What would you say was the biggest challenge with it's been the last 3 years, hasn't it, of doing the business, or has it been shorter, longer than that?
We registered the company November 23, so just over a year officially working on this like full time. It was part-time basically I was trying to, so what I normally do when I have what I call a crazy idea, because this isn't the first one, I try and break the idea. I try and prove that it won't work.
Sure.
And then if I can prove that it won't work, I then don't have to pursue it and I can put it to bed in my own head. So I was doing that for a while on and off, which is why about 4 years ago I had the first kind of version of this. And I didn't do anything much with it at the time because I just got some bad advice, and there was some stuff that I thought would take at least 18 months before we could get it to market, which just seemed too long. But is how much faster someone else with an existing license could have done it. But on and off for a few years while I was working full time, and I just couldn't break it. I couldn't prove that it wouldn't work.
That's great.
Yeah.
And in terms of the growth of the business, I know you're fairly early stage from that side, but how are we in terms of client acquisition, and how is that sort of going?
That's the chaos right now. So we are not one of those, and certainly I'm not one of those founders who, it's not the sort of product where I could build a wait list of 10,000 eager customers waiting to buy it as soon as it's ready or anything like that. That would have been wonderful, but it's not that sort of product. And I don't know a single business owner who would have been that keen to get on a hot wait list for something that's about to drop.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've focused on building the first version of the product, which we did and launched in middle of December on purpose, just before Christmas. Then, since that, we have focused on finishing the fundraising round, and now that the cash is in the bank, I don't get to theoretically spend money that may or may not appear. Now it's, this is what we've got to work with. What are we going to do with our budget? And we've been prepping for that, but now it's let's update exactly where we are. We're working on building out the team. What are the first few proper hires going to be? Probably sales resource. But we've also engaged with our partner marketing agency. So we're onboarding with them and doing all of the prep to kind of work on that. And it's not focusing on TikTok and Instagram. It's much more about channel partnerships, which just aligns so much better with our product and my mentality as well. And just putting in all the foundational steps. So we're about to announce, and it is official, so I don't think I'm spilling any state secrets here, but we're about to announce an official partnership with Sage, as well as doing our launch event, which is hosted by them and out in the world. And all of that is a long-winded way of saying that we've been building all of the foundation work to be doing early conversations with channel partners rather than going out and hitting, milestones that are veneer metrics for us of we've got 10,000 users on the platform. We haven't. That's not what we're focusing on at all. We're focusing on selling through accountants, for example.
Right. Okay.
Because of the timing, they're traditionally unapproachable and unreachable throughout Christmas and then January. And now is when it starts building up that really exciting momentum where we see it gaining proper traction. We've had all the early indicators of it.
That makes sense. So instead of doing sort of, B2C style marketing, you're going through partners and probably having a sales team to reach out to accountants. Is that right?
Probably, yeah. So we are focusing on accountants, bookkeepers, everyone in that kind of world, even CFOs. It's quite, I don't know what the term is for it, but it's definitely, which is why the partnership sort of go to market just works a lot better for us, whether it is them or different businesses, that it kind of it fills a gap for them as well as for their own customer base.
And was the decision made for the style of approach, was that made by you or was that made by the marketing team? What was the decision behind, what was the thoughts behind that?
On the deck, this beautiful deck that I've been finessing endlessly for a year, the options were always available to us. It's a true B2B business to business product, but the actual routes to those business users are D2B, direct to businesses. So if you have a business bank account, you can go and self-serve, just as you would with opening an account with Starling, Monzo, Revolut. But that is more like a B2C route to market, which I have no experience in whatsoever, and actually, obviously, especially because of the costs that you can throw money at it, which I don't also have experience throwing money at a problem. So that was always an option that we could pursue, and we probably still will. Then it's affiliates, resellers, people and businesses who want to recommend and refer our product for no financial incentive, which is the true partnership side. We've also got white labeling, which means anyone can come in and put their own branding on our product as if it was their own. It's possible to do that now, but I think it's a little too early to be really pushing that unless it's for bigger clients, which is a longer sales cycle that hopefully we're going to have resource for soon. And then eventually this could be sold in as a true kind of white label solution into banks and financial institutions. But that is a very, future state type thing.
Yeah.
So the options have never changed. They've always been on the table. Then it's been, okay, well, what's the, not the lowest hanging fruit, but what ones do we want to focus effort and budget on, especially while
Yeah.
you're bootstrapping.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been more, not so much necessity, it's been lean into my background is all B2B.
Mm-hmm.
I won't then, pivot overnight and hope that I can make B2C a success. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. I'm not going to be sitting there on TikTok getting viral videos that are going to sell my product. It won't work. It'll go viral for all the wrong reasons. And they say there's no such thing as bad publicity, but I absolutely will probably prove that wrong at some point. So it's been a decision, but it's not been kind of, it's been which one do we focus on right now rather than which one do we tackle first and forget the rest. We've always got those 4 options, I suppose, that we can still put more resource and budget against. But we haven't had the budget until very recently, and we're talking less than 2 weeks now that we can actually physically allocate money against that. So it's been what makes sense. And we were already, between us, fairly well connected in fintech, accountants, financial spaces, especially through the intros that Georgie made very gently over the last year. I guess it's not necessity, it was just circumstance. Now we get to kind of go, okay, well, which ones do we want to continue working on? It's more, it's more about proving it than trying it and proving it and maybe pivoting, which most businesses need to do now, than it is about this is it, this is the one that's going to work, and this is the one that we're going to hire for.
Yeah, I actually agree with the strategy. I think it makes sense. The way kind of I picture that, it's almost like the foundational stuff and having that real strong base of like accountants referring it and companies like Sage or whatnot, so that could give it to clients. I think it makes sense to have that before looking at something like going direct to the end user, because like you said, that could be I need to throw quite a lot of money at it, which would be a lot easier of a decision if you already had a foundation of quite a lot of customers from this other route. So yeah, I actually think it makes perfect sense. You mentioned Accountex earlier. Are you considering doing things like stalls and exhibiting and whatnot, or no?
That is
you
not
said you got a friend there as well, so you might have some experience from someone else there to pull on.
You know, when I said just now that there's no such thing as bad publicity, and I might prove this wrong, I caveat that this is nothing more than a joke, but we did absolutely take the mick the other day. Behind me, there is a giant squirrel tail, which I'm not going to show right now, but there is like this whole guerrilla squirrel and marketing thing. There's the reason that we went with the branding that we did, and we might end up changing it either now or in the future, but there's a reason. There's actually a story behind the name, but the reason that we went with the branding is finances and accounting, let's be completely honest, and I had this even when I was in tech, it's a boring topic. Like, it is difficult to jazz it up. It's difficult to make it quite, the likes of Rachel Harris make it so much more, colourful and come to life, and I don't have that skill at all. I'm not very good on social media in that way. But I'm going to lean into the humour behind it because it's visual. You can picture what you're doing when you're talking about squirreling money. It's immediately obvious in a visual way, but it gives me a bit of a giggle as well. Early stage, low budgets. We'll work with what we can. And one thing led to another. My friend Jim runs Karma, and he has a stall, I think, every year now at Accountex, a stand, and they're doing fantastic things. Accountants seem to absolutely love their product. I can see why, but I went to Accountex last year to hear my friend Ariona talk. I got my dates and my times mixed up, so I completely missed her talking. Walked in, saw Jim at the stand. I didn't know he was going to be there. I recognised him from one conversation we'd had a year before. Made a beeline for a friendly face. Then ended up just chatting away to him and like jokingly pretending that I was helping out with the Karma stand rather than do any actual work. Because I don't want to be, walking around pitch slapping anyone. And this year they said they were gonna, because their whole thing is about planting trees and being carbon neutral, carbon credits. So they've already got, I think, outfits for dressing up as trees. Jokingly said, come with us and dress up as a tree. And someone else mentioned, well, if he's a tree and you're a squirrel, one of my colleagues was going to be a squirrel.
I know where this is going.
I'm going to chase Chris dressed as a squirrel around a Caltex the entire time.
Yeah.
And threaten to bury him under vendors' tables like I'm squirreling the nuts away. And I'm just like, we're going to get thrown out and we're going to get arrested. So we're not actually going to do this. But in my head, I was picturing it far too vividly. So no, I won't be going to a Caltex with a stand because it's definitely not my kind of route in. But I might go and actually hear my friends talk and not get my times mixed up this time.
Yeah, so maybe I'll see you there. Are you going to the one in London or Manchester?
Probably London, although I suspect that this year and next year I'm going to start pounding some pavement in more of the expos. Certainly if they do more fun side events anyway, but I might end up going, especially if there are, maybe panel opportunities or anything like that, or just because I know some of the people that speak now, so...
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it is a good expo, to be honest. Out of the ones I've been to, it seems to have a good vibe about it. But I understand what you're saying in terms of if you're there to network, it's a bit awkward at expos because people are there just to, walk around, watch the talks kind of situation.
Yeah, which is why I desperately need to bring salespeople on board, because I will go to see my friends and chat to them, which isn't really what you go to an expo for in terms of sales, right? Which is going to be their job, not mine.
Yeah. I mean, on that point then, do you have an idea of number of salespeople you're looking to hire? Again, I don't want recruiters to start bashing your door down to try and bring salespeople.
They won't have any success if they do, because there's no recruiters right now. I think we're going to start with one kind of BDM type, or I don't even remember what SDR stands for, but we got a fairly clear picture of what would make sense at the moment is someone who can open some doors and then close some deals, which is the bit that I'm probably weakest at, I suppose, and just the most inefficient use of my own time. I think we're going to start with one. I can be talked out of it. We're going to actually update all of the business plans, the forecasts, and what we're going to spend the budget on over the next 2 to 3 weeks now. Because I know what the gaps are, and then we're going to see what that all looks like. And I suspect it might be easier to start with one until we see exactly what, because I've been talking about all the foundational stuff. We're going to start now seeing what that all brings in terms of traction. If it goes in a particular direction, it's going to be easier to update our thinking and our team. With that, if we haven't thrown too many people at the wrong thing at the wrong time, I suppose. So if we do it fairly gradually, or at least sequentially, and it's just finding that right balance between what's best to outsource because it's easier, faster, and easier to control budgets for the time being versus actually building it up in-house as well. Yeah.
It's a really interesting time because you're at that point where you're almost ready to go now. So I think it'd be interesting if we pick up another conversation in maybe 8-9 months as well, just to see where you are and see how things have gone on.
So different.
Yeah, I'm actually think that'd be really interesting to see and have a second sort of chat just to see, right, okay, that's where we were just when you got funding and you're thinking about salespeople and marketing and whatnot. And you've got this partners approach. A year on or 9 months on would be a really interesting chat just to see where that next step is.
I'm not great at talking about money because I can find it quite awkward, but I think it might be really important because we've not been secret anyway about it. But when we talk about us being funded, we have raised the equivalent of £250,000. That's the value of the round, but the actual cold hard cash in the bank is £185,000.
Right.
6 figures to me is a vast amount of money. Okay, I know plenty of founders, especially in the tech world and fintech, they raise millions early stage. I ended up putting in a couple of applications for grant funding last summer, and one of the things, bits of feedback that came out was you've underestimated your budgets. You can't do anything with what you're budgeting. And I'm like, 6 figures to me when I can build and launch a product for less than £10,000. It's a wild amount of money. So hopefully people can hear that I'm not used to throwing money at a problem, which means that I will continue to do things kind of step by step until I'm comfortable that it's all the foundational stuff is solid. And then it will pick up a little bit more momentum, I suspect, where people might come in and go, do you want to do this a little bit faster? Do you want to be a bit more aggressive? Yeah, maybe. Right now, we're just building all the all the bricks.
Yeah.
And to me, that's still a lot of money that I can do a lot with over the next year, which is why I do laugh, and I do think that it's going to be very, very different in 8 to 9 months for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you can get a really good BDM in that can get in some early indicators of sales and a process that that works, it's really then you could just scale up that side and go from there. But yeah, I think that's probably a really great place to sort of end it. Just thinking, right, okay, looking forward where we're going to go, and yeah, I think we'll definitely get a second chat in just to see where that next level is.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully, I'm not sobbing.
I don't think so. You're doing all the right things, I think.
Yeah, still have my squirrel tail then as well.
Exactly. So how would people find, first of all, you and find the business? What were the best ways to potentially get in touch or look into the business?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, mostly in terms of commenting and chatting than posting, but I am Andreea Daly and I'm pretty easy to find on there. Money Squirrel, same as it sounds, also on LinkedIn. There is an Instagram account. We haven't done a huge amount with it yet, but again, Money Squirrel UK, you can find that on there. And the website, so it's moneysquirrel.uk at the moment. That's the best place to start. There's some fun little squirrel graphics on there and a couple of little puns that we've really leaned into. So if nothing else, go and have a laugh.
Perfect. Well, it's been great speaking to you and I really appreciate spending the time.
Thank you for having me. It's been so great to chat.